So, EcoMachines incubator, why in London? By way of context, the previous business that I built was in Cambridge, where New Hugh, and that of course is seen as one of the leading technology clusters in Europe, rightly so, in a number of areas, and a number of Nobel Prize winners, and so on and so forth. And when I started working towards launching EcoMachines Incubator, the question I kept on getting is, well, why don't do it in Cambridge? Why don't do it in Oxford? If you're going to be focused on automotive, for instance, why don't do it in the Midlands? If you're going to be looking at composites, well, surely you should do it in the southwest of England. I suppose I've got a slightly different perspective. As you can tell by the name, I'm a little bit coming from the outside. And I think when people coming to London from outside of the UK, when they come here, what they see is not only a place where you have a combination of expertise from pretty much any area that you need in any industry of interest, but you also have a place that has an incredible connectivity to the outside world, and a place that people from outside of the UK want to come and do business and even to live here. And I think this provides a very important link to the gap that UK SMEs and high-tech startups have. We have no shortage here of strong technology startups. There's no shortage of that. In terms of statistics, actually, we have one of the best statistics in the world. Where there is a massive gap is going from a university spin-off, following your seed investment or your Series A investment, and then making that leap and becoming a global export house. The UK is a very big economy. It's big enough to grow a business up to a certain level, but it is not that big so that you can grow into a global leader without accessing export markets. So in that sense, for us, London is the obvious location because it is easy to access the various high-tech clusters in the UK, in the various industry verticals, but also it's a place where you've got access to investment, access to other expertise, and it's easy to access for the outside world. It's easy for people from around the world to come and see the sort of companies we're backing. Just to give you some sense of the things that we're trying to do, we are explicitly focused on on advanced engineering and high-value manufacturing. Again, a difficult area. When I talk to friends at Tech City or over in the US, they ask, well, why do that? That is so hard. Look at what the likes of Y Combinator or Techstars now in London are doing in the software space. Look at the venture capital industry is going towards that industry. Well, what we think is that advanced engineering is, from a social perspective, obviously it fits into the rebalancing that we're trying to achieve with the UK economy. But there is another aspect. Many of the companies that you see coming out of Tech City have certain level of fragility, in the sense that once there is a certain level of success, typically somebody comes, buys them, and they move over to the West Coast in the US, a nice place to move. It's difficult to resist the option. There is the other aspect that as an appendix of the primarily US-driven tech economy, they're quite susceptible to investment cycles that are pretty much out of our control here. So next time the bubble bursts, the investment flow that we have at the moment will be not necessarily there for those companies. By contrast, when we look at energy, clean tech, advanced engineering more broadly, you're looking at industries in which Europe has perhaps a greater role, and areas where companies that we grow here would, we think, have a greater stability, greater future. So what do we do? We have a fairly broad focus in terms of sectors of interest, but many of these fit with what we've heard today, what's being done in London. And just to give you some examples, one of the first companies we invested in is in the industrial lubricant space. That's using a technology developed from the Weizmann Institute in Israel, using nanoparticles for create super-performing additives for lubricants. And obvious areas of application for us are, for instance, in the offshore wind turbine space, where where a big driver of the cost of deployment of offshore wind is the cost of maintenance, actually accessibility of the wind turbines, especially in winter. Well, here is a way that you can extend the mean time between maintenance cycles of offshore wind turbines, and that's not only worth a lot of money to the operators of those of those farms, but actually it makes locations for farms, it might in the extreme make locations for farms feasible that are not feasible at the moment, especially when you're looking at the extremely large turbines that are being built at the moment, or even further afield if you're looking at floating turbines where maintenance will be a big issue. On the smart cities side, and again focusing on some of the areas that were mentioned earlier, things that we're looking at are in robotics in the building industry. When I think of the building industry, I kind of think of an industry that hasn't changed that much from the time of the Romans. You know, what did the Romans ever do for us? Invented building. But we're seeing really exciting things in the robotics space that are making one of the least productive service industries, are enabling disruption in that industry, new ways of building, but also from the perspective of what London is trying to do, much cheaper ways of insulating areas that are frankly quite expensive to do at the moment. So there's a number of other fields, but I think I want to talk a little bit about the approach and the process that we've been developing. When we started with a hypothesis, and that was that, first of all, the very good work that venture capital firms are doing starts a little bit later than where the gap is at the moment. Once a company has gone through to a certain level of revenue, let's say £5 million, there is no shortage of VCs in the UK or internationally that will be taking a look at it, a serious look at it. There is also no shortage of, less of a shortage than a few years ago of angel finance that can support companies coming out of universities or other locations of technology and innovation to get to that first step. However, there is a gap in the middle. And also when we look at how generally innovation happens in the engineering and hardware space, which is what to a great extent will drive the low carbon, the move to a low carbon economy, when you look at those areas, it's fair to say that it is slow, significantly slower than what you see in the software industry. Now, part of that is because it is more difficult to build a hardware business. It takes a lot more money and time to build an engine. But surely another part of it is also the culture of how innovation happens in those spaces. If you go over to Tech City, and certainly if you go over into the West Coast, you see businesses that are being really built at light speed. They also fail at light speed, but that's good for the ecosystem because ideas get into the ecosystem, they get tested, they get funded to an extent, they work or they don't work, move on. In our space, there are projects that have been limping on for a decade sometimes, many of those. So there is both a need from a social perspective and from a very hard-headed private perspective, a great opportunity of changing the speed at which innovation occurs in that space. To do that, what we're doing is we're combining advances, if you will, in accelerator methodology, from a lot of which we're seeing in the software and digital media space, looking at what can we adapt in our space, but also looking at best practice by leaders in the hardware space in terms of both speed of deployment and the speed of R&D. So our formula is that, we have a fund that is enough to back between 10 and 15 companies over the next 2 years, something that we want to, if it works, we want to scale up later on. And our formula is that we are taking the classic 3-month accelerator process that you see in many of the software and digital media companies to a 9-month and even up to 12 months accelerator program. We customize that to the needs of the specific companies that we choose to work with. We invest something like up to about £100,000, and we use that period to take the companies from a proof of concept to something that is investable. Much more, we hope, than what they would be able to do on their own. We do that, obviously, there's the cash element, but again, in this space, 100K, there's only so much that it can achieve. Basically, if a company that approaches us where our money is enough to get them to sustainability, they're not for us. They can get money at better terms from somebody else. So we see our role as really preparing the companies in terms of identifying partnering spaces, helping them crack through the 20 market applications that they have, that they haven't figured out which one to start with, helping them choose the first one that they're going to focus on, helping them build a network of partners through our own network, but also that of the companies we work with, and also a very strong mentor group. And I'm glad to see 2 of our mentors here, Hugh and Simon over there, that are helping us again find the best way to grow these companies. The second aspect is that, again, recognizing the funding gap that exists in this space, and different from what accelerators do in the software and digital media space, is that we also put in a significant amount of money at the next stage of investment. We put in up to about £500,000. The reason we do that is when we get to the next stage investors, we are the ones that have, as an investor, the ones that know most about this company. So again, we want to signal very strongly that this is an interesting company that we want to work with, and we are hoping to leverage that to build a bigger Series A than would be otherwise the case. In terms of the selection criteria, it's the sorts of things that you would hear from VCs. The difference is that, the way I'd like to put it is that whereas some of the VCs will take a business plan and say, well, hasn't really proven a market yet properly, big team gap, I can see, okay, come back later. Whereas for us, that is the opportunity, within reason, if we can see that we can actually add value to that company. So again, we're looking for a very specific moment in a company's growth history where we can make an impact, where our cash actually can make a difference alongside the value-added services, and helping the companies get to the next stage of their development. The management team, I think, reflects London's mix. It's fairly international. So there's myself, a Bulgarian via Mozambique and South Africa. There's a Russian investor on board. There's somebody from Germany, from the automotive industry, somebody from France, from the power generation industry, a British, ex-British VC, a Canadian professor of entrepreneurship. But what we are doing with this team is really combining both networks and skills and trying to really come left field for some of the companies that come to us. When a software startup goes to an accelerator, it's because they have typically come up with the idea 3 or 4 months ago, and sometimes they come up with it on the day. True story. When companies come to us, they've already been doing it for a few years, whether it's in a university lab or somewhere else. So clearly we need to be able to add something different that they haven't been able to do by themselves. We operate across the river, the rainmaking loft, which is over at St. Catherine's Docks. Again, it's a iconic London location, but also one that enables us connectivity both within the UK and outside. But also being on the fringes of Tech City also gives us access to some of the PR, comms, strategy talent that is coming out of there, applying it in our field. And especially when you're looking at power electronics, smart grid, some of the robotics plays, actually the talent coming out of Tech City is quite complementary with what we do. Less so when we're looking at battery chemistry, but in terms of the investment so far, I mentioned there is a company in the nano lubricants or synthetic lubricants space. There's another one that we've backed that's in the range extender combustion engine space. But we started in January, so we've been running rather fast, and we have now a fairly solid pipeline. So over the next few months, we'll be making a few more investments. The aim is to get to a portfolio of 10 or 12 by the end of next year, and then it will be one in, one out in terms of the process that we are following. I realized my English was getting better when I started getting Monty Python humor, so I couldn't resist including one of these. Why the accelerator approach? The question that we always ask. Do I have another 5 minutes? 2 minutes. All right. Common to all accelerators is a structured approach to equity investment, preparing the company for a follow-on investment round, and a key role for mentors. Now, again, this is complementary and similar in some ways to what the VCs do, similar to what angels do. But what we are trying to create here is creating a workflow, a repeatable formula that with some customization we can apply to companies. So in the way we're looking at VCs, as much as we respect them and the amount of money that they have, we look at them in a way as a cottage industry, in the sense that a lot of the know-how and experience in the VC leaves when one of the partners leaves. Part of what I did before in the IP industry was focused on a similar approach. So here we're trying to create something that is scalable. Otherwise, the VC economics just don't work at such an early stage of development. And one of the elements that we are trying to adapt into this space is the lean startup method. Now, this is a buzzword in the software and digital media space. Of course, its roots come from lean manufacturing, some time ago in the manufacturing space. However, what these sorts of methodologies have that is useful for startups is that it is not a academic textbook, but it is something that an entrepreneur can internalize, recite off the top of his head, and when he's really short-pressed in terms of resources and has to make decisions fast, it gives him a formula, a cookbook by which to rapidly make decisions about what type of clients should we talk to, what are the sorts of hypotheses we're trying to prove. So one way to look at our model is that we're looking at what does lean startup mean for the hardware space. So some of the key principles in lean startup are that you need to have a minimum viable product. So don't wait for the perfect product, go with something that kind of works and go and talk to clients as soon as you can. Continuous deployment, deploy continuously in a number of locations with different types of clients so you can get learning from different types of markets. Split testing so that you can learn. There's never a perfect experiment in a business world, so you need to have multiple comparisons so that you can really figure out what works. Actionable metrics. In the software space, they have a great term, vanity metrics, and there's a number of those in hardware businesses as well. How many conferences I've been to that have had excellent feedback, and how many grant applications we've put in that have had good feedback from the reviewers. Whereas what matters arguably is sales. And also being able knowing when and being able to pivot, to change the business model and even move into a different type of product if it doesn't work. So it's very much a learning journey ahead of us in terms of looking to build a scalable, repeatable model to accelerate the growth of energy and cleantech companies. And well, we're open for collaborations and certainly looking for help.